Saluti a tutti, and welcome to this episode of Ciao DMV, Italian American Life in the DMV. My name is Joseph Barone, and I will be your host. This podcast channel is dedicated to all things Italian and Italian American in the DMV, aka DC, Maryland, and Virginia. My focus is on the Italian American experience, from family stories to little known history to businesses to cultural events and beyond. Mostly the good, but sometimes the not so good. Today, I am extremely pleased to have with me Alessandro Stabile, founder and CEO of Magma Space. Welcome, Alessandro.
Joseph, thank you very much for having me. This is exciting.
I am so happy to have you here. You don't know how excited I am. And so, why don't we get right into it? Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you were born, and in particular, I want to know some of the family values that you grew up with.
Absolutely. So I'm from Rome. I'm Italian. I was born there, lived in Italy for 24 years when I got my bachelor and master in aerospace engineering. Then I moved to the UK, where I lived there for 7 years to get my PhD in space mechanisms. And then I moved to the US. So I went from capital to capital to capital, Rome, London, and now Washington. And I've been living here for the past 5 years. I'm now married. I have a daughter. Her name is Luna. We're trying to find a name that was the same pronunciation in English and Italian. So there was no problem with but my name is always misspelled and mispronounced. And so we're trying to find a simple name. So Luna was born almost 2 years ago. And yeah, I live in the Navy Yard, and now I'm happily, American Italian. I got my citizenship in 2023. Yeah, and I'm proud to support both, cultures, countries, and make the bridge between the two continents. The old world and new world.
That's wonderful to hear, and so happy to hear about your daughter Luna. That's beautiful. What were some of when you were growing up? What were some of the core family values that you grew up with?
I mean, definitely, hardworking. My family is immigrant family. My grandparents moved from my mom's side from, Italy to Venezuela in the 50s to find a better life. Right? They were people with no education, but they work hard. They started their own business, and then my mom was born in Venezuela, and then she moved back to Italy. So I always learned that, like, you need to be a go-getter. You need to, like, life can be adverse, but you need to find your way and you need to believe in yourself. And I think I channeled that in, me moving from Italy to the UK to the US. So, the hardworking mentality the Italians have around the world, right? We're a small country, but yes, we are everywhere, and we are successful in, starting businesses, etc. It's because I think we hardworking. We always try to strive for the best, and I think I try to channel that from my mom. And from my dad's side, instead, is more the ingenuity. He has several patents in Italy, so I think I combined, the creativity from my dad. He's kind of like a Renaissance man. He likes to carve wood and draw, and so he likes to do more, like artistic things. And on my mom is the grit, the being driven. And I think I think I combined the two in what I've become and what I am right now.
But one other thing I think was important, I'm listening to your voice when you talked about your daughter, and I could just tell how excited you were. And so the importance of your family, I could just tell that in your voice.
100%. 100%. I feel like, we do every morning for the happiness of my wife. But every morning we call my parents and we do a 5-10 minute call with my daughter. Of course, my daughter is 2. She doesn't speak yet. She does a lot of babbling. And so I want to make sure that my daughter knows my parents, right? And they're not strangers. So every morning, 8 a.m., it's a classic, and my mom loves it. And I'm hoping that my daughter grows knowing that their grandparents, even if they are, an ocean away, they're still close. And I'm really happy we can keep that going.
That I have to say, that's beautiful. It almost, as corny as the sound, as we say in America, it almost brings tears to my eyes. how wonderful that is. I'm
Mhm,
also interested, I'm just gonna mention this, and then I'm gonna jump into our next topic, the Venezuela connection. You know, it's very interesting.
mhm,
My cousin, my mother's nephew, left Sicily and went to Venezuela for a number of years
mhm,
before coming to the US, and I learned that many Italians
mhm,
left Italy to go to places like Venezuela, to like Argentina, and then eventually made their way, of course, to the US. So I thought that was
mhm.
that's very an interesting family piece of information. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yes, of course. Venezuela is in the news, right? I have
Mhm.
still relatives, aunts
Oh,
and uncle and cousins over there. And, they're happy, of course, Maduro is gone, but it's still really up in the air, the situation. So we need to be careful, right? But
yeah.
yeah, they love Venezuela. And my grandparents, were doing 6 months in Italy, 6 months in Venezuela. And so they were, in love with the new world, the opportunity that Venezuela gave to them. You know and so I have also relatives in the US, actually, like when the big waves of immigration is in the 1900, usually mostly in the US, and then after the war was mostly South America, like a lot of, you said, Argentina, Brazil, and Venezuela. They were the three countries that kind of got most of Italians. Yeah.
Even Australia, but that's for another
Yeah.
time.
Hmm.
So I wanna get into Magma Space a little bit.
Hmm.
How did you get started with this company? How did you found it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I made the joke usually that my last name is Stabile, which is stable, right? And I found myself working on my PhD on satellite stability. And so when I started working on that, I thought, okay, this must be my calling, right? This is what my destiny was supposed to be. And so I started working on satellite stability as my PhD, and then I realized that satellites vibrate and they affect imaging, they're affecting other applications that you can do from space. And so when I moved to the US in 2019, I thought there must be a better way to stabilize satellites. And so I pitched to NASA by myself. I wrote the proposal, I pitched to NASA, I went to talk to NASA folks, and I pitched an idea. They liked it. In the US, there is this program called SBIR, which is grant program that gives money to startups to start developing ideas. And so I was able to get the first grant from NASA by myself during COVID. And so during COVID, I had to do tests in my one bedroom apartment with my wife. I had to rent out equipment. I have bungee cords hanging from the ceiling. I have a bunch of different wires attached in the hallway. My wife was pissed at me, but I said, "Listen, you need to just let me get some data so that I can show NASA that I'm on a good track." And I was able to do that because then I won my second grant. And then from there, now we are, more on the DOW side. And now we are a 7-person team. We are hiring 2 more. So we're growing, becoming almost a real company, it's exciting.
It is a real company. Whether you've got one person or whether you've got 7 people, it is a real company. But I wanna delve a little bit more into the stabilization thing.
Hmm.
And again, most of my viewers are not people in the space program or maybe heavy into science.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you are trying to do
Hmm.
with the stabilization and satellites and rockets, etcetera. What's the goals and purposes of the
Yeah.
work that you're doing?
Yeah. The best analogy is, let's say, if you take a picture at night with your phone, you will know that because of your hand vibration, the image is not going to be nice and sharp. It's going to be a little bit blurry, right? That's because, again, you have your hands, even the more stable hands are always going to be a little bit shaky. Now, the best way to take a picture at night is on a tripod, right? So that's why professional photographers have tripods to take better pictures. Now, the same thing happens in space. Now, you have a satellite that is 500 kilometers away, so really far away, and you're trying to look at details of like a car or an airplane or something relatively small. Well, if you have the satellite a little bit vibrating, because that's what happens on a satellite, there are mechanisms on the satellite that make the satellite vibrate a little enough to affect the image and the quality of an image, then the image is not really useful to you. Because if you want to see, is this car, is this a person, this whatever object you want to detect, if you cannot make the object, well, that image is kind of useless. So this is why now that space is becoming more relevant, there are more and more companies going to space trying to do the most craziest things. stability and performance are becoming really important. So the way we do it is by removing the main source of vibrations, which are ball bearings within satellites. They produce all these vibrations, and use magnetic levitation. So we're using, almost looks like magic when you look at things levitating and floating in midair, but it is a well-known physics problem, and we're trying to make it into space, which is kind of like a novelty. And all of a sudden vibrations is reduced by more than 95%. So you can imagine, if it was a problem before, now with our technology, all of a sudden this satellite is extremely stable, and so you can see better images, you can do better images, you can do laser communication. We're talking about power beaming, so transferring energy with laser, which also sounds like Star Wars sci-fi, right? Like a kind of like a Death Star situation. But like, this is something that the DoD is working on, and we want to support them. That's why the DoD is funding us at the moment.
But I think it's even more, not just simply for even DoD, it's even for the average person. When I think about my background, which was in a large international bank, we invested a lot in what some will call third world countries or developing countries. And satellite imaging was extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not to the same extent as what you're doing, but it's extremely important to have good, accurate photographs, images, etc., in order to determine what do you need to do and where do you need to do it. Which
Mm-hmm.
really, when you come to think about it, if you don't mind me saying, really affects and helps the average everyday person.
Mm-hmm.
Most people may not think about it in this way, but what you're doing is taking a very traditional technology, ball bearings, which may be very, very well produced, but still, no matter how well produced, may still have little bumps and little,
Mm-hmm.
you know, imperfections in it, no matter how well you produce them, and moving to this magnetic levitation technology. And if I'm correct, this technology has been actually around for a number of years,
Mm-hmm.
but you are actually making improvements to it.
Well, in space, there's been really few examples that
Oh,
NASA
okay.
tried, and so we're kind of like the first to commercialize this
Oh,
in space.
excellent. Oh,
So
okay.
that's why we have an edge. We have our mode, and we need to get to space as fast as we can, and that's what we're trying to do right now. And I want to add something, as I agree with you that this is not just the DoD, so science or national security. It is helping. It could help with improving the GPS, so like accuracy of GPS. It could improve the way you communicate. Starlink. We're talking about having internet everywhere in the world. Well, you need good satellites that have high throughput. High data rates between the satellites. That's what we can achieve with our technology. We can increase data rates by more than 50 times what is achievable to even more what is achievable today. So imagine the connecting the billions of people that today don't have fiber optics on the ground, and you just need an antenna that, let's say, Starlink, but there will be more companies making those networks, and all of a sudden you have internet everywhere in the world, no matter where you are. Also at the poles, let's say, it's really magical, and we want to be part of that,
And,
revolution.
and I think that's great because I think that's one of the points I was hoping to get through to this is that what does this do for the average
Mm-hmm.
everyday person? And that is those are excellent points.
Yep.
Better GPS, better communication for the average person around the world. Now, you mentioned that did you move to DC because of the funding? Did you move to DC because of you were hoping to get into work with the government? What was your impetus to move to DC?
Yeah, no, DC was kind of a randomly, in a sense that my wife, we were living in the UK. She was working there on a visa. She's American. And so after a few years, she said, I'm done with the UK. I want to go back to the US. I said, okay, let's go back to the US. We got married in 2018. And then she started looking for a job, and her background is political science. And she got a job at New America, which is a think tank not far from the White House. And they are doing political reform. And so she found herself here in DC, and I followed her in 2019 as soon as I got my green card. And to be honest, I was surprised. Like, when I was thinking about starting my company, I didn't think about DC as a potential, place where to start it, because you would think space is there's a lot in Florida, of course, is in Texas, in Los Angeles, Seattle. But as I'm living here now, 6 years, I believe that actually there's a lot of space companies in DC, because here is where the money is where the Pentagon is here, NASA is here, Congress is here. So I'm actually really happy to be here, because constantly I go to events, I talk to stakeholders, so military people, like everyone that is involved in the space business is here in a sense. So yeah, I found myself here, and actually I want to stay here. I just told my team that we're going to expand, that we're going to find another office within DC, because I want to stay in DC proper. I like DC, the cosmopolitan aspect of it. Everyone from wherever you come in the world, you can find your community. I think that's beautiful. And DC is such, it's a metropolitan, it's a major city, but doesn't feel like a major city. Again, I come from Rome, chaos, London, beautiful, but also 9 million people. And so DC, I think, is a beautiful combination of like culture, the people that are here, it's livable, the metro system is good. I mean, I really like everything about this. So I'm really happy that, the chance destiny brought me here, and I'm happy to stay here.
Well, that's wonderful, and we're glad to have you here. But talking about, you mentioned a little bit earlier about funding. Is most of your funding from grants, or do you have people who invest in your company?
So most of the funding to date are from grants. We got more than $5 million from different agencies. And we just got another grant that is interesting, because it's a cost matching program. So the DoD is going to give us $2 million if we raise $2 million. So far we raised $500,000. And so I'm currently fundraising for $1.5 million. The beautiful thing about this program is, every investor will put $1, and the DoD will give me another dollar for free, like non-dilutive. And this is, a good way to de-risk the investment for investors. It shows that the DoD is clearly interested in what we're doing. And so I think it's a win-win situation for everybody. So I'm fundraising. Yeah, talking to angels, I'm talking to VCs. And yeah, I'm hoping to close this round within the next couple of months. Now that the holidays are over, everyone is back in the office. Restarted the conversation that I left in mid-December. And yeah, really exciting to close this, move on, grow the team, expand the office, and really get to space as fast as possible.
Excellent. So continuing on with the DC train of thought, the DC thing, how is life different in DC from Rome? What are some ways that it's different?
As I said, Rome, I love Rome. Listen, I go there constantly, but it's chaos. It's, traffic, and it's not really easy to navigate. The metro system is not great. I feel like, I live in the Navy Yard. Metro is here close to when I go for a run, I go to the Congress, to the Capitol Hill to see the Supreme Court. It's more livable. It doesn't feel like the stress. I rarely drive. I only drive to go play tennis. That's it. I don't drive for work. My commute is like 2 blocks, and I go to my WeWork. So I think that the beauty of DC, I think I'm basically in the center of DC. As I said, I can walk in 10 minutes. I'm on the Capitol. Beautiful. And then I feel like I'm in the center, but I don't need to. I have the crowds and the chaos that usually a city like Rome has. So I think it's a good balance of livable and, as I said, culture, and it's the pace of that I'm living right now. I like it. It's I don't feel like stressed because I need to drive and I cannot find parking. That will be in Rome for sure, 100%. Here I feel like less stress because that's not the life that I live. I don't need to drive constantly. I can walk everywhere, and it's good also for my daughter. Right, we can just walk around. There are parks around.
Yeah.
Grocery store is 2 blocks from where we live. This is completely different from my life in Rome, for sure.
Now, since you were in the UK for a couple of years, and now you've been in the US for 5 years, and your wife is American, she's not of Italian descent, is she?
No, she is. She is.
She is? Oh, excellent.
I'll
So
tell you this: her last name is Strano. So the last name is Strano, which is weird, right? They translated weird or strange. I'm the stable one, so I'm the stable. She's the weird one.
well, I can just imagine the arguments you get into over that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What are some family traditions that you keep, that you brought over from, as we like to say here in the States, you brought over from the other side? What are some family traditions you keep?
Yeah, so one thing that I want to do more, but I definitely would like to incorporate for my daughter is like Sundays usually where when my mom used to make bigger meals and more elaborate meals like lasagna, roasted pig or whatever. And so like, because you have more time, you want to sit down properly at the dinner and the lunch, for lunch at the dining table. And so I think I want to bring back, like making, more elaborate but really good meals with my daughter eventually, right? Like kind of like make it like we sit together, we enjoy the meal together, and it's something that definitely I would like to incorporate more in my crazy. Running a company is always a lot of my mind, a lot of stress from that aspect, from the company aspect. But I want to make sure I enjoy these little things in life, which is you sit down on a Sunday, you make a nice lasagna, you can always like enjoy and take some time to just relax and enjoy each other's company. So definitely that's something I would like to do more often. And I see my mom, like she loved this. She loved making food for us. My mom used to work in a telecommunication company, coming back at 7 p.m. at night, and by 7:30 there was dinner, 3 courses. She was really quick. She loved to cook for us. And I love that aspect of cooking for other people. I see cooking as a way to bring people together. I don't see just as way to eat calories, right? For me, it's like, eating is an important aspect of Italian culture. And I like that. Both me and my brother are like, we like to cook. And my mom is always surprised how much we like to cook, try different recipes, try to be elaborate, try to come up with some nice new recipes. And yeah, so it's definitely, as an Italian, it's a stereotype. Food is key, and I want to make sure it's just not just the food itself, but what the food and sitting at the table together represents. And I feel like that's beautiful, and I would like to keep that.
Okay, that's wonderful. And just out of curiosity, where is your wife's family from? Is she also the family also from Rome?
Sicily. So,
Ah, where
uh-huh,
in Sicily?
half Sicilian, half from Calabria, and they moved to the U.S. I would imagine at the beginning of the 1900s, and they went to Pennsylvania, and then they grew up there, and then my wife then moved to upstate New York, and then we met randomly in a bar in Rome. She was there for visiting her cousin, and side by side the bar ordering drinks. 2012, and then she followed me in the UK, and then I followed her in the US. So it's been almost 14 years that we know each other. Yeah.
Wonderful. How wonderful. And where in Sicily is she from originally?
I think she's from the Catania region area.
Well, that's where my relatives come from. My grandparents come from the city of my mother's family comes from Ragusa. My father's side comes from a much smaller town called Militello in Val di Catania.
Beautiful.
And I keep in touch with the relatives, both sets of relatives. Not every day, a couple of times a year, we kind of chat and send messages back and forth. Now, I want to just move into what kind of our last topic. And what are your thoughts on Italian and Italian Americans in the DC area? And I say this because, y- and I know some people are going to get insulted by this, but I've heard many Italians, younger Italians, and you, of course, are much younger than I am, come over here and they say, the Italian Americans that are here, they're wonderful people, they're good people, but their minds are still of the Italy of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And when I first heard a couple of young Italians say that, it gave me pause for a moment. I started to think and I started to say, you know what? Yes, you're in many ways, they're right, because that's of our grandparents and the time of our parents. My mother, for example, although was born in the US, went back to Italy at the age of Sicily at the age of 2, and then lived there until 1947. And of course, the dialect and all of that sort of stuff. And so I kind of have to agree with that to some extent. What do you think about the Italians and the Italian Americans who live here and the community in general? Again, not necessarily a criticism, it's just kind of an observation.
Yeah, my father-in-law, who unfortunately just recently passed away, he was born in 1940, and he's a proud American Italian. As I say, his family was from Sicily. And he kind of like introduced me to Louis Prima, which, believe it or not, I never heard before coming here. And that's kind of like explain. I do see what you're saying. Like there is a lot of nostalgic remember, like thinking of Italian immigrants in the 40, 50, as you said, they're like, fresh out of the boat, like coming to the US and bringing still their culture. And of course, the Italian Italy were kind of like, evolved in a different culture, different way. And so, yeah, I do see some attachment to, the 40, 50, 60s that where the Italians, when moved to the US in those periods. So remember Italy in that time. But yeah, I definitely see that. My wife always thinks like you guys brought the opera, the music, and your music is awful. The Italian music. It's like, maybe it's true. We don't have the best music. Like we actually listen to American music, and Italian music is like pulp, and we lost maybe the tradition of being the beautiful music that we did in the, I don't know, centuries ago when we were doing opera or other stuff. So I definitely see that argument. So my wife is younger than my father-in-law, but she also see the Italy maybe the culture went a little bit more pop, and we lost a little bit that some of the things that we were really famous or strong for in the 40, 50, and 60s. So yeah, definitely I can see that. I'll try to be, now that I've lived in the outside Italy for the past 12 years, I can see the exaggerations of the Italians. I can see Italians being, like really attached to their parents, right? Mammone. Have you ever heard this word, mammone? When a person that doesn't want to leave their families until their 30s, right? And so mammone because they're attached to their moms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I can see that. I still have friends in their mid 30s, late 30s that still are with their parents. So it's a thing. This is still happening. And so now that I live abroad, I can see these problems with Italy. It's like, okay, you need to be more independent. You need to emancipation comes from living by yourself and not just with your parents. But so yes, I do see some nostalgic views of Italy that I think have evolved a little bit more. It's still Italian that move abroad in the 40, 50s. They wanted to have a better life, but still they were attached to their homeland, right? That's the beauty of that period of history. Like these people, like your family, my family, like leaving everything behind in Italy to go to the unknown, right? US, Argentina, Venezuela, but still have a strong desire to kind of like go back to their country, to see their family in Italy. So that's beautiful, and that's why the nostalgic part comes from. Is they remember what they left in the 40s, 50s, and they're hoping to stay attached to that. And I would imagine, for me, when I talk about the 90s, it's probably the same thing that Gen Zers. They think in the 90s we have Walkman and we have discs. Compact discs. Like, what is a compact disc? They don't know what this is, right? I'm nostalgic of the 90s, and I guess a lot of Italian Americans are nostalgic on the 40, 50, and 60s, where, that's the time they left the homeland. And, that was easier times, everything was easier. And then you need to move to the unknown and try to create your life from scratch, which is tough. I've done it for myself, so I know it's tough. Understanding the culture, the laws, the traditions, right? It's not easy. But I'm a better person because I've lived in the UK, because I've lived in the US. I've seen people from all over the world, and I think my views now of the world are better because I've experienced diversity, and that's beautiful.
That's wonderful. Yeah, Louis Prima comes, of course, from New Orleans, and Italian culture was even very different there than here or where I grew up in New York City. All very, very different. And Louis Prima, I think, has kind of had a resurgence in the last couple of years here.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he was big in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and of course, if your daughter, winds up watching Disney movies, she'll see him in one of the Disney movies, and he's made that resurgence now, I think.
I
Uh,
mean, we do play in our home, so we do play Louis
okay.
Prima, Angelina. We do play those
Yeah.
songs because we
Okay.
want. They're really fun. Again, I've discovered them in the last 5, 7 years, so they're really fun. I
And,
wish I'd known them before.
and there's lots of Italian American singers here in the U.S. Jerry Vale, and a number of others here that even here in DC they weren't familiar with. But anyway, one last thing before I let you go. If someone is interested in contacting you, want to learn more about your company, maybe they want to invest in your company, what's the best way they can contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely LinkedIn. I live there. That's the tool that I need to use to stay in touch with my space community. But of course, also email. My email is a.stabile, so Stabile at magma-space.com. I can send you that if you want to put in or in the description of the podcast. But yeah, absolutely. And I'm in the Navy Yard, and we work by the Nat Stadium. Yeah, if you're in the area, you want to just talk to me and then see what we're doing. Just you can send me an email and we can make it happen.
Excellent, excellent. So, Alessandro, once again, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mille grazie for being part of my podcast and sharing your story with our listeners.
Joseph, thank you very much for having me. And it's amazing that you talk to Italian Americans and keep the tradition going, the culture. So thank you so much.
And if you're interested on being part of this podcast, please feel free to contact me at ciaodmv@gmail.com. Ciao, CIAODMV at gmail.com. And please remember, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, take a moment to like, comment, subscribe, and or share with a friend. This is Joseph Barone, your host, signing out. Ciao for now.